Hey everybody, it's your host Danny Haiphong, not live but in China, going from Shanghai to Wuhan on the Fuxing high-speed rail train. This train goes upwards of 350 kilometers per hour, and this is the train. Very clean, very pleasant. 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail right now in China. It is one of the big investments China has made, and of course they've been able to do this because China does not invest in war like the United States. So it's been hard for me to follow what's happening in the world, but let's begin with Trump in the Middle East, especially Israel. I was reading this astonishing op-ed by the founder of the Times of Israel, David Horowitz, and Israel right now is incredibly unhappy with Donald Trump. And why is that? Because Israel is so insecure right now, and a big reason for this is Trump's Middle East visit, going to Saudi Arabia, going to Doha, Qatar, meeting with Mohammed bin Salman, meeting with, of course, the Al-Qaeda leader, Mr. Jolani, and also going to the UAE to construct deals. He signed a massive weapons deal, of course, with Saudi Arabia, and told Saudi Arabia that it's their decision whether they want to join the Abraham Accords. He hopes that they do, but he's not going to rush them. It's going to be done on their time. So this has all angered Israel. And why? Because Israel wanted to have a seat at the table. This is what Horowitz says over and over again. Israel wants a seat at the table. Right now, Israel, as well as the United States, but Israel in particular, is going through a pretty big crisis. Before Donald Trump went to his snap and very rapid Middle East tour, Yemen declared an aerial blockade. They hit the Ben Gurion airport, or they hit at least very near and close to the Ben Gurion airport, piercing the Iron Dome and injuring several Israeli settlers. After this, Israel has been in complete panic over the fact that Donald Trump has ceased the bombing campaign of Yemen, while at the same time, Yemen's Houthis, or Ansar Allah as they're actually called, decided that they were going to conduct this aerial blockade and intensify their operations on Israel, which have intensified. In fact, there are hypersonic missiles and ballistic missiles and drones being fired upon and targeting Ben Gurion Airport and other parts of so-called Israeli proper almost every other day, if not every 24 hours. I believe there were 3 attacks in 24 hours during Trump's Middle East visit. So all of this has Israel in panic. Netanyahu has made himself a pariah, and even Donald Trump, who is no enemy of Israel, he has been working hand and foot, allowing Israel to continue its genocidal practices in Gaza, its occupation of Syria, its continued violence in Lebanon. He has not prevented any of this, and in fact has given it the green light. But Netanyahu angered Donald Trump pretty heavily when he was talking to U.S. officials like Mike Waltz behind, in his administration, his regime, was talking to people like Mike Waltz, who was demoted to UN ambassador from National Security Advisor, about a possible Iran strike, as Donald Trump is trying to be, how should we say, we can't call it strategic, but he's trying to maneuver the Iran situation in the interest not of peace, but of a war that Trump and his administration can accept. So right now, Donald Trump is focusing on possibly getting a Nobel Peace Prize, JPCOA number 2, while trying to save face, maintaining aggression on Iran. It's a very delicate situation, and it's one that exposes many things about the U.S. and Israel's position, especially in West Asia. First, Israel's position in West Asia has declined, and in the world it has declined. It is in a monumental crisis. First of all, let's just be honest. Nobody likes Israel. And why is this? Well, Israel has had a genocide be live streamed for now what we are moving into 2 entire years. Then you also have the fact that Israel has pursued its expansionist ambitions while doing this. And also, you have a crisis inside of Israel where not only is its economy struggling, but you have reservists not showing up for this forever war in Gaza, this forever genocide in Gaza. And you have divisions within Israeli society, even though they're not pro-Palestinian divisions. They're divisions nonetheless that show that Netanyahu's personal ambitions, his political ambitions, his need to protect himself is becoming more and more unpopular, not only inside of Israeli proper, but of course around the world. So this is a crisis, and Ansarallah has actually intensified this crisis with the heroic stand and solidarity for Gaza. And now the United States is not bombing Yemen, or at least it's temporarily paused its bombing of Yemen in order to pursue Iran and pursue these other issues in the Middle East, and essentially admitting defeat to Ansarallah itself, because how many jets now, F-18 fighter jets, are on the bottom of the Red Sea because of the evasive maneuvers and the hits that Ansarallah was able to strike upon U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Truman. So this is an incredibly astounding moment in history where we are seeing Israel and the U.S.'s decline in real time, despite the violence and despite the bluster and despite all of the mental gymnastics and political gymnastics that Israel and Donald Trump are conducting. But Donald Trump is trying to save face. He is doing something that I think is very important to note, in that while he is not a pro-peace president, Donald Trump is asserting what I believe is a friction in the U.S.-Israeli relationship. It is, who is wagging the tail? Is it Israel or is it the United States? And right now, the United States and Donald Trump cannot afford to look like Israel is wagging the tail. And this is a big debate. Does Israel control the United States? Does the U.S. control Israel? In my estimation, Israel is a military outpost of the United States, and all of its behavior and all of its aggressions and all of its policies in the region are geared towards satisfying U.S. interests. However, that does not mean that Israel doesn't have its own independent interests, and that Israel doesn't want the United States to look the part as if it is in control, as if Israel is in control. So this is a big conflict that Israel faces, and one that in the United States face between each other, and one that is not going to be resolved on the Trump administration. We know that Donald Trump at times, and in many instances, looks, he's tucking in the chair of Netanyahu. He looks like he is the one who is kowtowing to Netanyahu. And other times it looks like Netanyahu is the one who has to kowtow to Donald Trump in the United States. So this can be a very confusing dynamic, but I think what it really speaks to is that both of these imperial powers, both of these imperial vultures, they are in crisis. They are in big crisis, especially on the geopolitical front. So this snap visit is going to be an attempt by Donald Trump, and is an attempt by Donald Trump to demonstrate the U.S.'s continued power and influence in this region. But really what we are witnessing all across the geopolitical landscape right now is U.S. imperial weakness. The hegemonic ambitions of the United States are being called to task, that the world is standing up in many respects and not bowing down. This has been a big conversation here in China. I just participated in a conference with the Shanghai Institute for American Studies, and we discussed U.S.-China relations. A big theme that many of the scholars, many of these top scholars, including John Weiwei, discussed was how the United States is losing power around the world, that its power is in decline, and that the limits of American imperial power are being exposed everywhere. Let us just begin now with China. If we look at what happened in this trade war, these tariffs now on pause for 90 days, this deal, temporary deal brokered in Switzerland, had China giving absolutely no concessions to the United States. While the United States has had to pause their insane 145% tariffs. I think they reduced them to 30% in China, while China is keeping 10% tariffs, additional tariffs on goods. And now they're basically at the point where, but pre-Trump administration, where tariffs are, so almost starting from scratch. But what this means is that Scott Bessent, Soros's Scott Bessent, and Donald Trump have said that they cannot hang with China, while China kept and stayed the course. So this is a profound moment in history that shows that China, as a rising power around the world, has the capacity, especially on the economic front, but let's be honest, on the military front. Pete Hegseth has admitted China is in possession of hypersonic missiles that can destroy U.S. aircraft carriers in a matter of minutes. China has a population of 1.4 billion people that can be mobilized in rapid time to fight any kind of war on the Chinese mainland, which will never happen. The United States won't be able to reach it, or on the sea or by air. China's J-10C jets, look at what they did. Look at what they did during this India-Pakistan skirmish, this war. Those J-10Cs decimated India's air capacity. They took down, 6 jets? And Pakistan laid immense damage on the Indian military before it tapped out. And Pakistan is the recipient of Chinese weapons, old Chinese weapons, by the way, because China is not really an arms exporter. It's not a military industrial complex like the United States, which by far leads the world in arms exports. I believe nearly half of all arms exports around the world are just from the U.S. alone. But China has exported older arms to Pakistan, and look at what they did. So all of this is to say is that that's just one example. And then, of course, you have the Russia-Ukraine situation. These meetings, you have now Russia participating in direct talks with Ukraine, but Vladimir Putin is not going to listen to U.S. puppet Zelensky be demanding of Putin to meet with him now. Absolutely not. So what we have in the negotiations is essentially a long, drawn-out process that has Russia continue to engage on the battlefield and propose ceasefires that it finds acceptable, brief ceasefires, right? Attempts to see how real are Ukraine's ability to even engage in peace talks at all. Well, of course, the United States, Donald Trump in many different instances has said he wants a 30-day ceasefire. Of course, Volodymyr Zelensky does. And Russia has stayed steadfast and said, no, we're not going to have a 30-day ceasefire because that's going to allow Ukraine to rebuild militarily, because the collective West has not stopped its arms transfers, no matter how ineffectual they are on the battlefield. So that conflict, the Ukraine conflict, is another example of how the U.S. has confronted the limits of its powers. But I believe nowhere is this more true than in the Middle East, if we go back to the question of Israel, because not only is Israel under siege right now by the heroic Ansar Allah forces that are saying we stand with Gaza and we will send our missiles to Ben Gurion Airport, to Tel Aviv. We'll continue to slam you and hit you for as long as it takes. We will do so strategically. We will take part in a hybrid war that includes an aerial blockade. It includes missile strikes, drone strikes, etc. on your so-called occupied territory. And in doing so, disrupt the economy and slowly but surely demoralize Israel as a settler state and increase the level of fear and tension within that society to the capacity that Yemen has the ability to fight this out for the long haul, rather than, of course, going into a full-fledged position of war, which would show its cards and make it more difficult to sustain over a long period of time. So it's a genius move by Yemen, and really what this exposes is, look, Iran was supposed to be, what did a friend of the show, Scott Ritter, say? He said there was going to be a nation-ending exercise on Iran, launched by the United States. They've sent bombers to Diego Garcia. They were sending more aircraft carriers to the region. And what did Iran do? Did it say, I give up? We're not going to stand by our position any longer? No. They stayed steadfast on keeping talks with the United States indirect. Then they engaged in these talks with the United States. They paused for a little bit, and they've been going back and forth. But Iran has from the beginning said, we will talk to the United States as long as the core demand is being discussed, which is the lifting of sanctions in exchange for some matter of concessions on its nuclear program, which, to be quite frank, are not a deal breaker for Iran because they don't want a nuclear weapon right now. And in large part, that's not only because of what people say, the fatwa, and it's against the religion. Yes, that is very important, but in my estimation, what it appears, given all of what we've seen over the last several months, and including over the last year plus, is that Iran believes it has the military capacity to defend itself beyond the need for the use of nuclear weapons. That if the United States and Israel are going to engage in any kind of concerted military campaign, that they would be drawn into a long war that they cannot win because Iran can fight and fight till the end, as China's foreign ministry has said about China. So this is an unprecedented moment in history, and it's one I've been reflecting on as I've been in China, because I think geopolitics right now is in a dynamic place where this shift toward a new world order is happening in a very rapid fashion. And here in China, that is what the discussion is. There's no discussion about the United States. It's not centered on the United States. The United States is being left behind. This empire is crumbling. It's becoming more and more decrepit. And China, Russia, Iran, the multipolar world are attempting to move forward within the framework of a world that is being choked and strangled and waged war against by this dying and decaying system of U.S. hegemony. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens from here. I'll be in China talking to more folks, getting more understanding what's happening, especially when I go to Beijing to end the trip. But I'll be in Chongqing. I'll meet with friend Daniel Dumbro while I'm there, Alex from Portified Media, and we will get a sense of the dynamism of China. Chongqing is a rapidly growing city. It is a city of 30 plus million people. It's the biggest city in the world in terms of population. And many have gone there, like iShowSpeed and many others now, to show off just how developed and how advanced and all the achievements that China has been able to accomplish. So I feel very lucky and very grateful to be able to do that. Without further ado, in closing, this geopolitical moment is one that should give us all pause about what the priorities for us as human beings really are. Because when I'm here and I'm sitting on high-speed trains that cost $75 to get 800 plus kilometers an hour and travel 350 or so kilometers an hour, when I walk around and I see the massive and rapid development that everyone tells me is very new and has essentially just occurred, when I see the confidence of the Chinese people, their raised standard of livings, and also the priorities of not just their scholars, but of ordinary people as a whole to increase and raise the standard of living here, to move toward modernization and eventually a modern socialist country by 2050. When I look at China's foreign policy in building closer relations with Iran, with Russia, when I see all these BRICS powers, these rising multipolar powers come together to chart a new world, we witness and we see the building blocks for what is to come, a hopeful future, and one that can help put into context the panic we are seeing from the now decaying imperial and colonial hegemons, those who want expansionism, those who want to seek endless profits and wars for them, and endless profits for themselves at the expense of the rest, who pursue militarization in order to build the infrastructure to make this happen. When we see how these changes are really part of a generation's long process of shedding all of the vestiges of the this long colonial order of Western European and, of course, American expansionism. When we see this, we have to just take heed to the fact that we are a part of it, that everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we digest, everything that we educate ourselves with, and everyone that we interact with and connect with, and all of our aspects of our lives are shaped by this rapidly changing world, and we are in for what I believe is a wild ride, given the fact that if we go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this program, if we go back to the panic of Israel with Donald Trump's behavior, Israel abandoning or Trump abandoning Israel. What we're really seeing is the continued decline and decay of an empire that will eventually tear itself apart. And it will be up to us to stand up like the Chinese people did here and say no more. We don't want to be torn up by a decaying empire. We don't want our lives to get worse. We don't want to see genocide. We don't want to see endless wars. We want to be part of a world that is more just, more fair, and puts peace, stability, self-determination, and the principles of humanity and its growth and its development and its sustainability at the forefront. Without further ado, everybody, I'm going to get back to this train where we're about to arrive at our destination. But Israel's in panic right now, and it should be, because it's not about Donald Trump necessarily going against Israel. That ship is not going to sail. But these internecine conflicts among the ruling elites, the U.S. foreign policy blob, people like Donald Trump and Netanyahu, for example, they're important in the fact that they reflect a larger world situation that is increasingly not going their way. And they are having a very difficult time managing and navigating these changes, the shift away from their genocidal imperial ambitions. And that is causing conflicts amongst themselves. It is escalating crisis. It is making the situation worse. And we will continue on this channel to follow all of the manifestations and consequences of these developments. Without further ado, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in on the Fuxing high-speed train. And I will, of course, be back with all of you soon, especially live when I return. Bye-bye.